industrious city where citizens and visitors freely trade, bargain, gather, and even scheme to make themselves rich, powerful, or wise.
A city that answers to no king or noble lord.
A city devoted to the gear goddess and its people who keep a steady rhythm of mercantile life.
A region that is the crossroads of the world, where trade flows up and down the River Argent, out the Dwarven Gates to the Iron Crags, north through the Margrave, south to Harkesh and Sewal, and the distant cities of Spice and Silk.
A city built on the backs of kobolds who were enslaved in silver mines, a place still scarred by a harsh family's diabolical practices and an autocratic rule.
Welcome to Zobeck, a place that now enjoys freedom, but is corrupt by pacts of blood, by temptations of the flesh, and by the raw power of untrampled greed that blackens hearts. Hey everyone, welcome to That Midgard Show, a podcast dedicated to discussing the Midgard campaign setting published by our friends at Kobold Press. I'm Clayton Thompson, and I manage the Midgard Adventures Discord server, an independent fan-based cooperative group that is affiliated with Kobold Press. We talk about Midgard lore, share tips and tricks, answer questions, and run regular organized play games, both online and IRL. Our community is open to everyone, particularly those new to Midgard and to role-playing games altogether. So check us out. We have an invitation available in the show notes below.
And I'm Joe Ticillo. I've been playing D&D for about 28 years now, both as a player and as a DM. I started my YouTube channel, which I recently renamed from DM Toolbox to GM Toolbox about a year and a half ago, to help game masters and dungeon masters and even players get the most out of their games in a setting agnostic manner. Traditionally, I've done more D&D, but I want to start covering other systems as well. I talk about the different tools, tricks, and materials I use to enhance my game and hopefully to help you enhance yours. I also review third-party books, Patreons, Kickstarters, digital tools, anything that can help you with your D&D or any ttrpg games. So subscribe to be notified of my videos as they come out. The link should be in the description below. And also, before we start our program today, Clay and I kind of want to just talk a little bit about the whole OGL drama that's been going on since early January. The timing of the recordings of our first and second episode was kind of right before the OGL drama broke, and literally like just as it was breaking on this first day or two. This episode was 2 days after Wizards announced they were leaving OGL 1.0A and the VTTs alone. So yay. Even though That Midgard Show is not a news show, we wanted to say something in support of the community and the game we love. You know, there are these aren't the opinions of Kobold Press, right? We're not Kobold Press. Clay and I are speaking for ourselves as game masters, as players, as fans of tabletop role-playing games, and as business professionals outside the game. So Wizards, on the afternoon of January 27th, announced that it will no longer be pursuing the deauthorization of the Open Gaming License 1.0A, abandoning plans previously stated in the drafted OGL 1.2. So all good news there. The statement comes after a relentless fan backlash, with the decision to deauthorize OGL 1.0A, which was revealed after IO9's Linda Codega reported on the leaked OGL 1.1. Wizards are also making the entire SRD 5.1 available under Creative Commons license, which is really cool, really huge deal. So we do applaud Wizards and Hasbro for coming to their senses and listening to the customers.
Yeah, so on the 27th, Kyle Brink, D&D's executive producer, stated on D&D Beyond that, quote, "This Creative Commons license makes the content freely available for any use. We don't control that license and cannot alter or revoke it. It's open and irrevocable in a way that doesn't require you to take our word for it. Its openness means that there's no need for a VTT policy. Placing the SRD under a Creative Commons license is a one-way door, and there's no going back," unquote. Now, this is huge news. You know, this was more than anybody, expected. And I think what drove their decision was the survey, their playtest survey for OGL 1.2. And they released some statistics, and it showed that 88% of respondents had no interest in publishing their work under the proposed OGL 1.2, and 89% were dissatisfied with deauthorizing OGL 1A. Now, these results are not a surprise given the vocal backlash from third-party publishers, VTT platforms, and the community. An online campaign to cancel D&D Beyond paid subscription has reportedly made a dent in Hasbro's revenue, and many game makers who use OGL 1A recently made plans to abandon the OGL altogether. But while this battle is won, the war might not be over yet. The community is still waiting to see the four corners of the contract, despite the SRD's entry into the Creative Commons. And honestly, I didn't expect Wizards to go this far, and I'm wondering if there's another shoe to drop in the future. But in the end, there's going to be case studies written about this entire debacle, by business schools for their students to study and debate how a Fortune 500 company broke the 7 basic rules of business. Know your products, know your customers, don't do anything to impact your brand. Don't do anything to piss off your customers. Be humble. And number 6, make money so you can create more products to delight your customers. And then there's the 7th rule. Reread rules 1 through 6.
Exactly. Yeah. And that all said, it's important to remember that this is a victory. Like Clay said, he's kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. The fight's not over, right? We still have yet to see what's coming for 1DND/6E, whatever you want to call it, which I would assume is going to be a more restrictive license. But with 5E safe, we now have that forever, which is really good news. So at the very least, you can continue to play 5E. Developers can continue to publish products for it and adjacent to it. So we have that forever. And I think that's a big win. So We'll see what they do moving forward. But, even though 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons is now protected by Creative Commons, just keep in mind, watch for what's going to happen with 1D&D. And the controversy surrounding the OGL incident has really crippled WotC's reputation and blew up 50 years of goodwill and trust with his customers, or at least 20 years since WotC's owned it. But, the Dungeons & Dragons, product in general. So while this is a big step in the right direction, Wizards will have to keep up this momentum if they want to earn back the community's trust. We still fly the black flag on the Midgard Show. I have it behind me. The Midgard Adventures Discord server and at GM Toolbox. We wholeheartedly support the upcoming Open RPG creative license known as ORC, which is irrevocable. Now that all this kind of stress is behind us, at least for now, we want to get back to what makes us happy and what we do, which is, making RPGs fun, playing RPGs, the lore, the storytelling, all the good stuff. So with all that said, Clay, how's your game going?
Oh, really cool. We did play Curse of Strahd Midgard recently. We got a couple of episodes under our belt, but I'll talk about that next time. But in the Southlands campaign, it's an exciting time. We're pushing towards the conclusion of the current story arc, and just kind of to recap a little bit. Our heroes are in an ancient necropolis located next to Herrick, which is on the river Nuria, and it's northwest of Purbastet. Okay. Again, this was a city in Nuria that was just kind of a sentence, so I kind of ran with it and added my own.
Have you been to Purbastet yet? Like, have they gone down into Purbastet at all?
They started there.
Okay, so you were using like the City of Cats book and stuff like that?
Yeah, exactly. In Purbastet, while the start off adventure was the Crimson Amulet, which was written and published in the Warlock series at that time, and so I introduced them to the part of Purbastet that's largely abandoned, kind of a seedier place. And I positioned the Crimson Obulette as an abandoned prison, that's built deep into the bedrock. Over the years, it has been taken over by, this huge ooze that has grown to 7, 8, 10 stories high. And when you first arrive and see it, you kind of see this wobbling bit of jello that kind of looks like a big giant waterbed. And so they have to kind of figure out how to make their way down below to the bottom to seek the artifacts that they were tasked by the Golden Antiquities Company to find. But that was like 2 years ago. So now they're in Herrick, and they are tracking a powerful necromantic energy in hopes that it will lead them to the zealous necromancer behind the undead uprising that has taken hold of Herrick. And they're also seeking out a powerful artifact forgotten in history that they've been tasked to recover. So, they're in this tomb that was built underneath an abandoned observatory that was dedicated to Thoth, Hermes, and Horus. And some cultists are pursuing them, and they're trying to keep them at bay and behind them. They've made their way through a sanctuary where some of the relatives of the family of priests and priestesses were interred. The setup was, you hear a lot of banging on the lids, from behind these curtains, and 4 or 5 of them broke out of their coffin, and they're slowly making their way towards them. So, there's that added pressure of, creatures heading their way, some cultists that are trying to get at them. And, it's kind of a mechanic I use to kind of keep pushing, the PCs forward, and right. Also as a way to kind of, grind down their resources. So, my heroes, a wacky group of people, they have this habit of searching for traps in the wrong place. And ignoring places where they should search for traps. And this session was no different, So, they're fleeing the undead. They want to put more room behind themselves in the pursuing cultists. And so they open the next set of doors, and they see this tiny little room, 10 by 20 wide, containing 2 statues on either side. And, it's a trap. This is one of those things that they should be looking for. And so in their haste, they went into the room to the other set of double doors, and they all got blasted with about 10d8 of lightning damage. And that was a lot of lightning damage.
What level are they?
Huh?
What level are they?
Oh, I'm sorry, level 8.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a lot of damage, even at level 8, man. That's brutal.
A lot of damage, and I rolled the 10d8, and, of course it didn't get up to 80, but it was still in the 50s,
That's above average damage.
Yeah. So, they're in a hurry, understandably. And so we have the 2 sets of PCs, we have the, let's move forward at all cost. And then the other half are like, you first, we'll watch to see what happens, so the you first members of the party stood back and kept the undead at bay while the smaller group was getting fried by the lightning. Now, nice. After they saw that, we have a Heroti rogue, which is Raven folk or Heru in other parts in Midgard. That character's name is Venka. He's a spellcasting rogue, and he set a mage hand through the room to test out to see how the trap triggers. And that was a pretty clever tactic, because as the mage hand was floating across the room, no lightning came out of the statues. We have another rogue in our party that's a thief. It's an Nkosi named Shadow. She had enough strength to make the running jump and was able to clear the 10-foot gap, which also did not trigger the trap. We have this very quiet tiefling warlock named Valsis. He just used Misty Step to bypass the trap altogether, which left our human druid Kriv, our Aasimar paladin, who's also a bounty hunter named Percival, and Venka, the Haruti. So Kriv, being the druid that he is, wild-shaped into a giant octopus he calls Roctopus, to bridge the gap and to allow the other members of the party to try to pass safely. But, Rocktopus is kind of slippery, and Percival failed his acrobatics check and fell to the floor, which triggered the lightning. Kriv took all the lightning damage. Percival crawled underneath Kriv and then crawled his way out to safety. And then, Venkin, used Kriv as a bridge, a smoldering bridge to get the other side. And then, Kriv came across and wild shaped back into his human form. So, he was kind of smoking for a while. They barred the doors with javelins and roped up the handles to guard their flank from the pursuing mummies and, the cultists. But a bunch of more exploration ensued. Yeah, and where we left off was they came across this room that had this head in a cage. And it was a mummified head and reanimated and verbally abusive. And the head was attended to by 3 skeleton guards. And so I had to play this head as your stereotypical overbearing, obnoxious sitcom mother-in-law. And I based her voice like Estelle Constanza from Seinfeld, this high, screechy, annoying voice. We ended the game mid-combat, but, the memorable moment was that, Marcus, the same character that chopped off his left arm, to pay to get access to a device that he wanted to get to track some necromantic energy. Well, he was out in the hallway, and he threw the slow spell into the room. And the slow spell has a really interesting mechanic. If the creature attempts to cast a spell with a casting time of 1 action, the caster has to roll a d20. Now, I typically am a terrible roller. I roll low frequently. And the spell says on 11 or higher, the head, on 11 or higher, the spell doesn't take effect until the creature's next turn. Well, guess what? I roll high. I roll a 17. So the spell doesn't take effect. So the way I played this was, you see this, mote of fire coming out of her mouth, and it's just slowly making its way to the target point. And so that gave, the PCs another round to whack at the skeletons and to get out of the way. And finally, when the head was able to complete her spell casting, the fireball exploded and no one was in the area of effect. And that was pretty cool. Now, if our audience, this story sounds familiar, well, yeah, it is. I adapted a Pathfinder adventure from the Mummy's Mask adventure path, and I changed it up to made it more Midgardy, and I used this as a story arc. So perfect. Don't be afraid to use Paizo content. It's fairly easy to convert. And the content is just wonderful. So definitely don't ignore that.
Stuff is great.
Yeah. So Joe, how are your games going?
They're not. We haven't had a chance to play, honestly. Because I have my channel and everything. The whole OGL debacle kind of consumed the last couple weeks of my life. Like, I feel like I could breathe again now. So that's good. But I have been doing a lot of game prep. So I am trying to make my Midgard game a little bit more sandbox. When we did our character creation, I said, listen, you 3 are going to somehow know each other at the start of the campaign, and you 3 are going to somehow know each other at the start of the campaign. I let them figure that out and write their backstories, which they've done. Using that, I'm going, they all have different reasons for having arrived at Zobeck. So now that I have that, I'm trying to make a flowchart of all these different possible paths that they may take and, where it might lead. It's definitely making my prep a little bit harder, but I've got about 3 or 4 possible adventures ready to go at this point, depending on what they do. Currently, I mentioned last time about how we did Dib's Wagon of Doom as a way to introduce them to each other. They were all in the square at the same time. They met Black Eye, who then gave him a tour and dropped him off at the Dancing Bear. And then I introduced them to an NPC that's kicking them into Everyone Lies, which is a great entry-level, level 1 adventure by Ben McFarlane. It's in the Clockwork City book. And if you don't have that one, if you have Streets of Zobeck, it's in there as well. But it's a fun little adventure that will really do a good job introducing them to Zobeck as a whole. It takes you through all different parts of Zobeck, which I really like. So after that's over, now it's like, what are they going to do next? So some possibilities I have is our cleric is she's from Stannisgard. And I think the name of her god up there, because she's a life cleric, is Boldar. But Boldar is really just a mask of Lada. And so in my version of Midgard, those two churches are, even if they don't believe it's the same god, they believe that they're kind of like they're friendly with each other. They get along. They're kind of like sister clergies or something like that. So our cleric was sent to Zobeck to seek the help of the high priestess Luca Anjali to see what aid that the Church of Lada can provide in Stannisgard to help build their church there, because their church there is fairly young. It's not definitely not one of the bigger churches there, and they're looking to increase their influence and do things. So what will probably happen is that Luca will send them on kind of a trial quest, and I'm thinking they're going to go into the Margrave, and I'm going to do the Honey Queen as kind of a kind of initial trial, and eventually that will lead to a longer pilgrimage, because the clerics of Lada have to go to this healing school in the south. So that'll kind of kick off something bigger for my cleric.
Right
in the meantime, we have this fighter from the Far East, from what would essentially be the real world version of Japan, whose family was all moving. They were fleeing a war, and they basically got sucked into the Shadow Realm, and he got lost in the Shadow Realm. He doesn't know what happened to his parents or anything like that. Wow. He recently was pulled out of the Shadow Realm in a ley storm by our wizard in the party, who's a Ravenfolk wizard, who is going to be a geomancer, and was trying to tap a ley line in the Margrave, which was way too powerful, and it kind of blew up. And so now he finds himself near Zobeck with this bard and this wizard, who were both traveling with a troupe of performers. All those performers just disappeared in that ley storm. So now it's just the three of them, and they're heading into Zobeck. So he's going to be seeking his parents, who I'm thinking may have been sold off into slavery or something like that, because there is a lot of shady stuff that happens in Zobeck around that, and we're actually going to talk about that later today in our episode. But I'm thinking that he might be somewhere down to the east a bit. There's a whole kind of kingdom over there that does deal a lot in the slave trade, so I might end up sending them that way for that. And in the meantime, the wizard, his whole thing is, the Ravenfolk generally don't practice geomancy. He wants to show that geomancy is a viable form of magic for his people. Right. So he wants to go visit all the different magic schools, and the Collegium is going to be his first one. So he's looking to get some help there. And it's not going to be an easy thing for him to just walk in and do, but to help maybe kind of get him a foot in the door, I'm thinking about eventually having some people hire him to help with, a missing friend, and that's going to be the adventure Death of a Mage, which was originally in a Warlock, but is now in the Clockwork book. So I think that's another possibility. So I've got a couple of adventure paths laid out. I'm trying to think what I'm going to do with the others, because we have a rogue from the Southlands who had to flee north, and she's not looking forward to going back down that way. And she's more kind of along for the ride with her friend the dwarf and their other friend, a Trollkin, which is fun because generally speaking, dwarves and Trollkin do not get along north. And I had told the two of them, because I have this Trollkin barbarian and this dwarven cleric, I told them, you two need to figure out a reason why you are best friends. It's got to, because normally your people would hate each other. I want you to come up with a whole story on why you two are best friends. And they did.
Wow. So, what a task to surmount.
Yeah, they did a great job. They like literally the barbarian was supposed to kill the cleric's like leader, and they were and the rogue was actually part of that group that was going to go kill them, and then werewolves attacked, and they all kind of had to fight alongside each other, and the dwarf saved the barbarian's life. Wow. And now she felt indebted, and like the cleric was really nice to her, and you know they kind of formed this friendship, and she realized that she was being manipulated and whatnot. So now they're very good friends. So it was a cool backstory. I was really impressed, considering they're both still fairly amateur D&D players. They've only played one campaign in their life, and that was with me. So I was very, very impressed with their backstory. So I have a lot of good material to work with, except for my bard, who she is a law student and super busy, and she still hasn't even given me her bard's name, let alone a backstory. So working with that. But
maybe you'll get a legal brief instead of a backstory. Huh?
Yeah, I mean, she's awesome. Don't get me wrong. She's one of the most funny players. She played a rogue in her last campaign, and she is hilarious. But she's playing this teenage, moody, kind of emo bard, half-elf bard. And I think it's going to be funny. I think she's going to do a great job with it, but she just needs to take like an afternoon and come up with some information on her character for me, because she's the only one who hasn't done it. But yeah, I mean, I've got these plans. I like the idea of the flow chart. I think a lot of people should maybe think about that, especially if you want to do a sandbox, is how sandboxy can you really get and have content. So it's nice to say like, all right, here's 3, 4, 5 possibilities, and start planning out and seeing what all the connections are, or not even a flow chart. There's something called the mind map. If you've never seen it, look it up. But mind maps basically allow you to just draw all these different connections. So that's what I'm trying to do, is draw all these connections and see how things actually can and will intermingle. And it's an interesting method for running a D&D game, but I think it's going to be cool. Sandboxes are intimidating to run. But I really want to give it a shot. And there's actually an article, and Clay, maybe we can post it in the show notes. It's a Kobold Press blog that tells you how you can use all the different little one-shots and small adventures that Kobold Press publishes and turn them into a campaign, how they can connect and how you can send your players from location to location. Because that's essentially what I'm trying to do, is take all these different smaller modules and interconnect them. In the meantime, homebrew an overarching story arc and their own personal stories all into that. And it's a challenge, but man, it's going to be fun. I really like it. I really, really like it. So like, rather than running Empire of Ghouls or Scarlet Citadel, I'm taking a bunch of different one-shots and different material and even stuff from, like you said, like Pathfinder and things like that. And I'm trying to mismatch this campaign and figure out how I can not just do a bunch of one-shots, but make it all connect somehow.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about sandboxes. You never know what the character is going to be doing. Characters evolve over time, a lot of times evolve beyond their backstory. So having all of these little things that you can plug in, depending on which direction they go is a very helpful tactic as a GM.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, man, it's a challenge, but I think it's going to be fun. It's something I've wanted to do, but I think also as a good GM, you can't leave it so open that there's no way you can prep, right? Like right. I've given them seeds. It's a matter of which seed they're going to take and run with. Right. So it still feels very open for them. And plus I've got this entire setting. So if they just ignore stuff, that's fine. Those wheels are still going to be turning and things are going to happen if they want to ignore the seeds. But I've got this entire Zobeck setting right now to play with, and Midgard as a whole to play with, that even if they go off in another direction, I can come up with quick seeds and quick things that I can insert, because these books that Kobold Press put out are super handy for that I can just grab something and run with it. So I'm excited.
That's great. So
why don't we hop into our main topic then, man? I'm kind of, I want to kind of talk about Zobeck and some of the areas and dive in a little bit to maybe its leadership and some of the, some of the different locations in Zobeck today.
Yeah, definitely. Last episode, we focused on the history of Zobeck from the beginning to the Great Revolt. And that's where the citizens of Zobeck freed themselves from the rule of the Strauss family. So over the next few episodes, maybe, a little bit more, we're going to spend a lot of time to talk about the Zobeck of today, give you a tour of the city's districts, introduce you to some prominent personalities that you can use in your games. A couple reminders, though. We only discuss published material and our interpretation of that content. There are many ways to use Midgard content, and there will be times that even Joe and I have a different approach and opinion, which is what really makes RPGs cool in the first place. So we always say your mileage may vary. Most importantly, we encourage you to talk about your interpretation of the lore in the comments below or in our show channel on the Midgard Adventures Discord service. There is an invitation in the show notes if you'd like to join and check us out. So let's get it on. Joe, where should we start?
Well, I think we should start with the leadership of Zobeck. That's kind of a good place, right?
Okay.
We've talked about the history and what led us here in this revolt and things like that. If you recall, one of the things we talked about was even how the rebels got the city guard on board by saying, we're going to have a council, and the captain of the guard will always have a place on that council seat. So, I think leadership is a good place to start. And the main thing is that it is a free city. There's no king. There's no noble lords per se. What we do have is we have a mayor. And right now, the mayor is this dwarven merchant named Konstantina Olik, I believe is how you pronounce her name. She's fairly new to the job. If you go back to the Pathfinder series, there was a different mayor. So this mayor has been around for a few years and doing pretty well. And then we have a council as well that kind of helps govern the city in a way. But we'll kind of get into the council here in a little bit. But some general stats on Zobeck as of today. The population is about 16,000 and growing. That's about 12,000 humans, about 2,800 kobolds, 850 dwarves, 200 gearforged, and then the rest, other 150 so we'll just say is other. Not gnomes. There's not many gnomes that live in Zobeck because the kobolds hate gnomes. So the gnomes don't feel safe there. So keep that in mind. If you do bring a gnome into the city, they should always be watching their back for kobold attacks. And really anybody should be watching their back for kobold attacks and thieving kobolds in Zobeck because that's something they do. Now, there are surrounding towns, right? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, the Crossroads regions is made up of a bunch of towns, So think of Zobeck as a city state, like Venice, was a city state. Mm-hmm. So you got Neurodel, small population, more of a village, about 4,300 people. You got Obersteinau, which is a little bit smaller, about 3,200. Most of those are the kobolds, and the rest are humans. There's the Vassalau Mines, which is near Castle Shadowcrag, and pretty much the entire population is kobolds, about 2,800 kobolds.
Yeah, the Vassalau, are those the silver mines or the iron mines? I can't remember because I know there's both.
A little bit of both.
A little bit of both. Okay.
Yeah, mostly silver though. And then Altbach, which is mostly humans and dwarves. Total population of about 2,200.
Right. And then, of course, we have castles, right? We have the surrounding castles. So there's Gelberg, there's Obertal, there's I'm gonna butcher some of these names just so we know. Ramara, I think is how you say the one.
Ramauer.
Steffastor. Did I say that one right?
Stevenstor.
Stevenstor. See, I told you I'm terrible with names. But most importantly, go ahead.
No, you're hearing a lot of Germanic.
There is a lot of German influence, and I'm terrible at German. But the most important, in my opinion, in the region, of course, is Shadowcrag, which we talked about last time because that was originally the Strass Castle. That's where the whole story that we told in last episode all started. And, I mentioned last time that there is a 5e adventure that you can go to Shadowcrag, and you get to go into the past a bit and see a lot of this history play out. It's called Return to Castle Shadowcrag. It is an extremely hard book to find because it was print only. There's no PDF, and it was a Kickstarter exclusive that they think they did when they released the World Book. But I'm happy to say that I recently acquired a copy that I found on eBay, and I was so excited So I
Right
now
on.
have Return to Castle Shadowcrag, and I cannot wait
Right
to
on.
run it. I'm very, very excited. That's definitely going in the game, by the way. We're working that in somehow.
Yeah.
I need a good hook to get them on that, but we're doing it.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, obviously, that influences the city is, actually the gods, which is a little weirder in Zobeck because I mentioned Lada, that's the healing goddess, and she actually has 2 temples there, and the high priestess of Lada resides in Zobeck. We have Holda, we have Perun, we've got Svarog or Voland, but most importantly, we have Rava, the gear goddess. She is the patron goddess of the city. The dwarves of Zobeck especially worship her. The dwarves of Zobeck are kind of a weird bunch to begin with. They're not like any other dwarves. They are very different than your average dwarf.
Any dwarf from the Iron Crags will come down and just not even understand these dwarves in Zobeck.
Yeah, and I mean even the dwarves from the north, the Stratusguard dwarves, they're like, what's going on with these dwarves? They are a different bunch, but they're super cool. And they developed like ring magic and things like that. But yeah, I mean, Rava is the goddess of Zobeck. She's the main one. A lot of people will maybe worship one of the other gods, but then like everybody also worships Rava. Like she's very important to them people there. So that's kind of the overview of Zobeck. But then, when we start looking into like some of the people, like we said, I guess I'll mention the dwarves first since we're already talking about them. They are a group that is very into their craft. Unlike the other dwarves of Zobeck that maybe worship, war, battle, a lot of them will worship Thor and things like that. These dwarves worship Rava. They are all about creation. They developed ring magic. You'll see them with rings in their beards and on their fingers, even rings over their entranceways to their homes to protect them. Many of them do like clockwork type of stuff. Many dwarves, up until recently, most gear forged were either human or dwarves. Now you're starting to see other races, but many of the dwarves even help craft the gear forged. They are a people of craft, and they mostly stay up in the gear district of the city, which we'll get into the gear district probably in another episode. But such a unique, cool bunch. And my group hasn't been up there really yet. I'm looking forward to getting them up there just to get my dwarven cleric's reaction. To see when she sees these very different dwarves for the first time. So it should be pretty cool. What else? What's your favorite of the people of Zobeck?
Yeah, we'll be remiss at saying that humans do make up the population of Zobeck, the greater part of the population, and a lot of them are immigrants, from other parts of the area. Most have hailed from the Midgard Kingdom, which is to the south. Some from the Duchy of Perun's daughter, Salzbach, Greisel, which is now occupied by dwarves, but in the early days, humans founded that. And there's humans that have fled Morgau and Doresh, the vampire kingdom. And but others have trickled in from all over Midgard, from the Southlands and Northlands, and there's even a few Kariv that have made it into the city as their permanent home. And that's kind of a big deal because Kariv are wanderers. In fact, if they stop moving, they are unable to reproduce, and so to be able to enlarge their families, the Kariv that are on the Rothurian plains, they don't stay in one place very long, the skin tones of all the humans vary, and there are dozens of languages, that echo through the area. But
you'll hear common, but you'll hear a lot of other stuff too in the streets of Zobeck.
But my favorite are the kobolds. The kobolds are they're not these this fodder that that in Forgotten Realms that you just toss into a battle, to get slaughtered. The kobolds, they're small, they're super smart,
Fierce.
they are resourceful, and they essentially founded the area. They were the ones that first occupied the area where the Dury River and the Argent River combine, and they started there, by mining. But if you recall the history, from our last episode, they were enslaved by the Strauss family and by the Shadow Elves to work the silver mines and fill the coffers of the Strauss family. They live in the Kobold Ghetto, which we'll talk about a little bit.
Yep.
They're nocturnal, so they're generally regarded as second class citizens. But I see them more as, you've got the people that live their lives during the day, and you've got the people that live their lives during the night. And the kobolds are the ones that live at night. They have their own culture. Their own way of doing things. In fact, you'll hear more when we talk about the Kobold Ghetto. Is the Kobold Ghetto is sized to their size? These are creatures that are about 3 feet tall, but a good chunk of the population of Zobeck is of kobold race.
Yeah, and keep in mind too, like if your players are out in Zobeck at night, they're going to see little groups, bands of kobolds. And kobolds are, one of the features of a kobold is pack tactics. They stay in packs. Yeah. They'll go in groups of 5 or 10. You'll see them dirty from the mines, walking around. They're hitting the bars. They're looking to pick fights. They might be out to just, rob somebody, but they're everywhere. They'll always be in packs. And I will suggest, if you are going to be interacting with kobolds, pick up the book, The Monsters Know What They're Doing. Every DM should have that book anyways to run fights, but read the section on kobolds in there especially, because I read that, and then, you're looking at the kobolds in Midgard, and you're like, yeah, it really talks about how they're going to act in a fight and in a combat, and how they really are going to utilize those pack tactics. And you get that feel of the kobolds in Midgard, I think, because they are very organized, is the best way I could say it. They really do stick together. They are a force to be reckoned with in Zobeck.
They're also a population of craftsmen.
Yeah,
they're the ones that created the mechanical works that keep Zobeck humming. Raise the bridge, lower the bridge.
Yep.
They were also part of the group that helped create Gearforged. As well.
Yeah, there's some of them are renowned clockwork artists. They even have a kobold in the Collegium that's a magic user. Mm-hmm. So they are very diverse people. Kobolds in Midgard, are very rich. And, I think maybe some of that is the namesake of Kobold Press. They really want to give the kobolds that extra breath of life in this setting, but it works so well. Small but fierce, right? That's what we say at the kobolds. And then, I was going to, I don't mean to circle back too much here, but you were mentioning the Kiv for the humans.
The Kariv, yeah.
And I always kind of thought of them as, what's the name of the group? Because you're doing a Curse of Strahd game. Right. What's the name of the humans? The Vistani or
Yeah, the Vistani. I replaced the Vistani with the Kariv.
Yeah, that's exactly, that's the perfect comparison. Very similar culture right there. So keep that in mind if you're like trying to get a real world equivalent for them. Very, very much that nomadic type of people, and good replacement there. Of course, I guess the other one we have to mention is what Zobeck is most known for is the Gearforge. It's the home of the Gearforge. We talked about the creation of the Gearforge during the Revolt, and to this day, some of those Gearforged are still alive. They, they're, I don't want to call them quite immortal because they can die. But they can live a very long time. Their memories are long. Yeah. Often becoming a Gearforge can be an expensive process. So often new Gearforge are rich merchants who want to extend their lives. But it can also be maybe criminals who are looking for a reprieve. That's life in prison, execution, or you become a Gearforge and serve the city for 100 years, kind of deal. Right. So often that's what you end up getting as well is these people who it was a second chance to, at life for them. And so the Gearforged themselves are this very unique variety of people with a soul and life. But recently they started experimenting with this other type of Gearforged that are, rather than using souls of living people, they're capturing the essence of elementals. And they are a little bit different because they don't have that personality and things like that. But what people are finding is that they can be taught. They can earn a personality. They can learn to be more life-like, and they will tell jokes. They understand what's going on. They are perhaps sentient, and it's this kind of controversy that some people are like, this is enslavement, because these other Gearforged will do things unquestionably if they're not taught otherwise. They will attack without question. They will work 24/7. They will do whatever they're told unquestionably. But there's this group of almost kind of like rebels that are kidnapping them and stealing them and teaching them, and they're learning to become something more. And so you have this whole moral dilemma kind of happening. So that's a great story hook too, if that's something that you want to get your party into, especially if one of your party is a Gearforged. What are their feelings on these elemental Gearforged that are being perhaps enslaved, perhaps abused? They can learn, they can develop personalities. So a very interesting dynamic there. And I also mentioned earlier that most Gearforged are going to be humans or dwarves, but we are seeing other races now becoming Gearforged as well. Right,
and the Gearforged race aren't just like humanoid looking. They can be dwarf, kobold, any race. So it's very interesting that there's this moral dilemma playing in the background about creating these automatons to just work and work and work,
right,
and so forth. The one pervasive element in the Midgard the Midgard setting itself is slavery, and that's when you're kind of treading into kind of X-Guard world. If you're going to include, these elements as part of your storylines, do talk with your players, to make sure that they're comfortable with it. Sometimes it's hard to kind of extract, that dark history, from the lore, but it's something that you can just hand wave and not even, bring up as part of your games. But, do know that that is a sensitive topic.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, always, kind of do your homework with your players, do your session zero, know what their hard no's are. I mean, me and my players who are, pretty open to most anything have some hard no's that I won't touch in our games. So, keep that in mind. And then, as far as the Gearforged go, I believe in Tome of Heroes, you did the Foundry conversion of Tome of Heroes. There are some new Gearforged sub races in there, right? A Kobold is one of them, but there's a few others as well. So if you have Midgard Heroes Handbook, you might only see dwarf and human, but if you get Tome of Heroes, you should see some newer types of Gearforged that are now being developed. So,
right. There's Kobold Gearforged. You can even make up your own. You can have a Trollkin Gearforged. And,
sure.
A Centaur Gearforged.
Just come up with a good reason why.
Yeah, you're really not, limited to R2D2 or even C3PO creatures.
C3PO, yeah. So I mean, the Gearforged are a very, very cool thing. I always, they're kind of like the Warforged, but a little different, I think. And they're very unique. I like them a lot. One of my players almost chose a Gearforged, but he went with the Ravenfolk instead. Yeah. So I'm kind of curious to get a Gearforged in my game at some point and see how it goes.
Yeah, and with the extension of the race in Tome of Heroes, the world's your oyster. I mean, pick it up, add your own spin to it, and go with it. And Gearforged are a little tougher to play, not that hard. But healing is different for this race, and maintenance is required. They are essentially machines, but they have a very rich culture as well, there are other races that reside in Zobeck, which more out of the way. They live in the Cartways, which is the Undercity.
Oh yeah.
Made up of old mining tunnels and sewers and stuff like that. So there you'll find Darrakul, Nagas, Darrow, devils, elves, ghouls, goblins, halflings, lizard
but not
folks.
Gnomes.
Not gnomes. Yeah, and we're going to talk about what the deal with gnomes are in Midgard in a future episode.
They've all been punted over the wall.
Right. But Zobeck has a very rich culture, a lot of it good, a lot of it not so good. But the one thing that they value most, all Zobeckers value most is commerce, and their freedom. They guard both of those, fiercely. And every year they celebrate their hard-won freedom during the Strauss Fall celebrations. And none of them forget that freedom can be tenuous. And, it's almost like Bastille Day. I'm pretty I would have to imagine that this was Bastille Day was an influence to this, but
for sure.
This festival celebrates Zobeck's thanks daily for the ability to run their own lives and are not under the tyranny of one family. And during that celebration, they celebrate their patron deity Rava. Because it was her that inspired the Gearford creations. And also, it's just a reminder for Zobeckers to stand ever vigilant, against, slavery, against cults, against, nobles that, feel that they are better than anybody else. As far as languages go, Common is predominant. There are people who speak in the Northern tongue. Dwarven, Draconic, of course, are other popular languages because of the dwarves and the kobolds that live there. And, even the Gearforge kind of have their own language as well.
Yeah. Well, the other thing to keep in mind, too, and I don't remember the page in the Midgard World Book, but there is a page that shows all the languages of Midgard. Mm-hmm. So keep in mind that, generally speaking, in most D&D settings, humans speak Common. Well, here, that's not the case. Common is just a common language that most peoples will, know to make playing D&D easier. But each of the cultures that we mentioned earlier, the human cultures, many of them have their own languages. So you will hear all of those languages spoken on the streets of Zobeck. And when, I had my players roll up their characters, I gave them the list and I said, here's the list of all the languages. The other thing too is on our Midgard Adventures Discord server, we do have that list as well, part of the character creation process. So you can, we got some great resources for creating characters because we talk about, what races and what classes and stuff like that you'll find in Midgard. So if you ever are looking at what are my restrictions around Midgard, check out the Discord server that has that info. But I wanted to bring something up because you said Zobeckers. Is it not Zobeckians? What's the deal there?
Yeah, well, that Zobeckers is what is written in the book. And I originally called them Zobeckians, as well. But they're but in the new Clockwork City book, they're referred to as Zobeckers.
Yeah. Well, the people there prefer to be called Zobeckers, and this is something I actually was reading on. There's a little thing on page 17 of the Clockwork book called Zobeckers and Zobeckians. Yeah. And basically, Zobeckers, that's what they refer to themselves as, is Zobeckers. That's what they want to be called. But many people on the outside will say Zobeckians, and they'll be like, yeah, whatever, They kind of let it roll off. But late at night, you get a few drinks in you, and you start saying Zobeckians, you might end up in a fight. Right? Take it a little personally. So outsiders can kind of piss them off a little bit by calling them the wrong thing. So keep that in mind. Fun, tiny little, it's one of those tiny little details that I love about the setting that you can throw in there is, I would have thought Zobeckians too, but yeah, they go by Zobeckers, and they they might take offense to being called Zobeckians. So keep that in mind.
So that's kind of nice, fun little twist that you can throw at your players.
For sure.
So,
and like you were saying, commerce is kind of their main thing. The only thing they value more than commerce is their freedom. But that said, we've talked about their freedom. The commerce part of it, Zobeck, if you recall, we showed the map last week. It is a crossroad. It's not only the center of the crossroad regions, it's pretty much the center of Midgard. All these roads go through it. The rivers go through it. It is almost like Rome in that sense. All roads lead to Zobeck. So they have trade by the roads. There's the road south. There is the River Argent. There is, so they have barges coming in and out. They send silks all the way down to the Southlands, and they send, they're receiving furs from the Northlands. You name it, it comes through Zobeck. This is a hub of commerce, and it's something that they value so much, and it's such a big part of their lives. There are people who we keep thinking of all these gear workers and merchants and stuff like that. There's a huge population of people who are just commoners who are wait staff and repairmen and work more common jobs. That is a big thing, but they work and people come to Zobeck. It's almost like, I also think of it kind of like New York. You go there to make it. Right. It's like a place that anybody can go and make something of themselves. They go there with hope. Sometimes there's people there who are refugees from the undead kingdom. What is it called? The Morgu?
Duchy of Morgu and Duresh.
Yeah.
Morgau and Duresh.
Yep. So there'll be people who escape there and come to Zobeck and try to make a life there for themselves. So there is it's this city of opportunity. And, it's funny because when you walk in, you might see it as this really cool, wow, this place is neat. Your renters are walking through and people working and people selling stuff and this and that. But as we start to dig deeper, there is a very seedy underbelly. Like I said, you get out there at night, you got kobolds roaming around, maybe picking fights and robbing people. There are cults. There's demons lurking in the shadows. There's a whole other side to Zobeck that you might not see when you first walk into the city during the day. So it is... that's the other part of it. It's commerce, but some people make their living out of crime. We talked about the slave trade. There's people dealing in spices and drugs. There's people dealing in stolen goods and robberies and all sorts of stuff. There is a very seedy underbelly to the city that you might not see at first glance. Yeah,
the skin trade is prominent, as well.
Yep.
Gambling, pit fighting.
The Shadow Fae. Trade with the Shadow Fae.
There's a robust trade with the Shadow Fae. It's a bit of a monopoly, but it does exist. There's this a character called Antonidas Jabber, and he started out as your typical young brash highwayman. He teamed up with somebody, took Merrick, and they kind of created a relationship with the Shadow Fae, and they are a pipeline of goods and services coming in and out of the Shadow Realm.
Yeah. There's so many story hooks to be had there, and you kind of hear us. We're getting a little excited talking about it because it is such a fun place to just be and to read up on. And it's like the more you start digging in, like you guys, if you don't already have it, you really should be getting the Clockwork City book, if you don't have it yet, or if you've got Streets of Zobeck and the Zobeck Gazetteer, you're doing pretty good, because it's just, there's so much cool stuff happening there and so many story hooks and so many things to do. Another big thing they have there is the festivals. You mentioned one festival, but there's like a dozen different festivals, right?
Right.
There's one called, I think it's a kobold one called We No Work Day.
Yeah,
it's just a day the kobolds all take off,
and it could be whatever day they want.
Yeah, whatever day they want.
Sometimes
this year it's Tuesday.
Yeah, sometimes they celebrate it often.
Yeah, too often. There's there's a River Fair Day, right? That's part of Lotta's Midsummer Festival. So that's a whole other thing. There's a Spring Trade Fair. There's a Miners' Day. There's a Festival of Light, which is also part of the Midsummer Festival. There's a Clockwork Festival. So much stuff. I even thought about bringing in the Witchlight Festival into there, because there's that whole connection to the Shadow Fae. So I thought that would be kind of a cool way that I could bring that festival in, do something with that, but also hook them in and pull them into the realm of shadows, and then maybe get into the court of the Shadow Fae and stuff like that. I mean, there's so many possibilities there alone. Maybe they even kind of sneak themselves into one of the other festivals, like, yeah, we're part of this festival, come on in. So there's a lot that you can do. And there is, I can't remember which one, but I know there's some information in one of the Warlocks about one of the festivals. There's an adventure set during one of the festivals.
Right.
I'd have to look.
Yeah, we'll look that up and put it in the show notes.
Yeah. Oh, I mentioned the article earlier that I was kind of using, that allows you to take all these smaller adventures and hook them together. And I know that one was one of them. It was kind of just a fun little festival thing where you buy some stuff, and then actually one of those characters ends up being a hook into another adventure. So a lot of fun stuff you can do. There's also, what is it called? Three Little Pigs. Is that the name of that one adventure?
Yep. It's a 3-part adventure.
Yeah, that you could do during one of the festivals where these, this I think it was a farmer's daughters all get turned into pigs, and you have to like save them.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff to be had around the festivals themselves, and it's a great break from the monotony of, adventure, come back, drink, sell your stuff, adventure. It could be a really fun role play session, and play games, and get into some trouble a little differently than normal.
Right. There's also a College of Magic, called the Arcane Collegium.
Yes.
And it's kind of one of the major spellcasting institutions in the area. They keep the student populations, fairly small, but they study all of the schools of magic there. Predominantly clockwork magic, but they study illumination, necromancy, illusion, magic, divination, all of the good stuff.
Yep.
And so if you kind of want to have a Harry Potterish adventure, you could spend, a lot of sessions, just in the Arcane Collegium alone.
Yeah. There's so much to be done. There's so much to be done, and we'll get more into the Collegium when we cover that district of the city, because we do want to dive into the districts a little bit and cover each district, because each one has its own unique flavor and locations and things you can do. So we'll kind of dive into those a bit. But since you did bring up kind of the Collegium and stuff, that's another big thing, right? Is just education and technology and magic are another very big part of the city, with both the Collegium, with the Clockwork District. Things like that are all very prominent in Zobeck as a setting. I really like the technology aspect, because, yeah, we have the education and we've got magic. Those things I think we see in a lot of big fantasy cities, but technology is something that is a little bit more unique to Zobeck. There is a clock tower in Zobeck, that's been around since the days of the Strauss family. We've got the Gear Forge. We've got a drawbridge. There's a bridge that, actually open and close. I had my players cross that bridge and have to wait for it to open and close when they were entering Zobeck. There's a whole adventure called Man at the Bridge, where that bridge breaks down and might blow up, and the adventurers have to take care of that. That's a fun one shot to run too, with pre-made characters all as kobolds. That's how we run it at Gen Con. Is you run it with, you don't tell the players till they sit at the table, you hand them all pre-made character sheets of all kobolds, and they have to save the bridge. So technology is a great other aspect, I think, of Zobeck that really needs to be explored by you when you're there.
Yeah. So Zobeck is extremely diverse, both good and bad. You have your haves, you have your have-nots. You've got vice, drug abuse, violence, smuggling, slave trade.
Yep.
A lot of X card topics exist.
Yep. Cults.
So be very sensitive about that. Yeah, cults. But they exist nonetheless. But Zobeck is so diverse that you can go in many different directions. And so where we want to kind of get into right now is the districts. And we're going to talk about a couple of them this episode, but Zobeck is composed of 10 different districts. And so, Joe, where would you like to start?
Well, I think the best place to start, or we'll start with my favorite one, is the Cartways. Because the Cartways is this very unique area. It started off with kobolds that had kind of dug out these tunnels and stuff like that. And then, the city kind of developed on top of that. So then at one point, the Strauss family was going to have this winter festival. There's this giant cavern called the Winter Hall.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically used these cartways, these tunnels and stuff, to ferry all these goods and stuff down to this cavern and to bring all the nobles and stuff down there. And it was so much fun and such a success that the nobles basically started using the cartways for their own personal stuff. And they started kind of fleshing them out and refining them and making them nicer and upkeeping them. And it was a way for servants to get stuff, from one place to the other without cluttering the nice upper streets of Zobeck, the upper districts and stuff like that, and keep them clean of the common people, while getting goods around. They would use them.
The Cartways were, founded by the kobolds. The kobolds.
They were. Like I said, they dug them out.
They dug them out. They're the first ones to settle in that area. They found, at the time there was like silver nuggets on the ground, and you plow a field and you see some silver nuggets. So they started digging underneath the sand into the and clay into the rock, and they found very rich silver veins. And I just wonder, Wolfgang grew up in the Chicago area, and in part of the history of Chicago is the Chicago Tunnel Company, and it's a bunch of cartway tunnels that were used to move goods from the docks, to various part of towns quickly and effortlessly, because Chicago has their bad winters, but when you're underground, no worries. So I just wonder if the cartways were inspired in part by the Chicago Tunnel Company.
Possibly. That's a good point. I hadn't really thought about it. I kind of thought of it too. I was kind of thinking more like, Prohibition era, right?
Yeah.
Where people were doing stuff because the cartways, it started off as these mines, but when the nobles started taking over, after this festival, they all wanted their own little grottos down there.
Right.
They would store stuff down there. They would, some of them would move through the cartways to go see mistresses and stuff like that. You also have in Zobeck, you've got the Collegium doing some necromancy type stuff down in there. You've got the alchemists, dumping wastes and stuff in parts of it. The original sewers ran through the cartways. There's this, they call it the golden age of the cartways. During the Strauss rule, the cartways were this place that really got, used a lot by more well-off people. You would think of it more as this underground place where the rogues hung out and stuff like that, but it was really more something for the wealthy. But then the revolt happened, and people are like, that's a symbol of the oppression, and they kind of sealed off most of the entrances to the cartways. And they're like, the cartways are off limits. Of course, they didn't seal them all off, and now it's more of that underground thing. That's where we mentioned cults and demons and stuff. You're going to find them in the cartways. We mentioned Daragul, which are like more intelligent ghouls and stuff like that. You're going to find them in the cartways. There's an entire black market in the cartways, so it's just a great place to go. In fact, in the Zobeck book, they have a whole map of the black market. There's a whole structure. There's like it's kind of very organized where different groups that use it will have their own guards, and they all take turns on different shifts and stuff like that at the black market. That's where the center of the slave trade is, in the black market. So there's all of that. In a lot of the bars and stuff like that, especially ones that have brothels, there will be an entrance to the Cartways somewhere in a back room, like a hidden door that people can still to this day use to get in and out unnoticed for the brothels. There is all sorts of neat stuff. There's a few vendors you'll see in the black market that will only appear at certain times. There's this one called the Mask Maker, who she's a doppelganger, but she can essentially change your identity. She's got this transformed humanoid ability, and she for a price she will change your identity for you. And then I think that for an additional price, she will also that will come with papers, new identification papers too. So I mean, there's all sorts of cool stuff that happens back there, but knowing where to get into the Cartways it's not obvious. It's not like, oh, I'm just going this alley, there's the Cartway entrance. It's like you kind of have to know where to go. It's generally going to be hidden. It's going to be a secret door. It's going to be in the basement of a bar, like go like Harry Potter when he comes out in the candy store, like it's under a tile or something. Like that's the kind of stuff that it's going to be, is these hidden entrances and places like that. But I mean, this is a huge network. It weaves everywhere around the city. And
it extends beyond the city, underneath the Margrave Forest to the borders of Morgau and Duresh.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, sometimes Morgau will, the undead of Morgau will come in through there. That's how they get in, and will buy slaves or, kidnap people and take them back as slaves, things like that. I mean, when you enter the Cartways, you're really putting yourself at risk. I mean, generally a well-armed party probably won't get messed with, but they bite. And, you can cross the wrong people, or somebody just thinks you're an easy target. It's not a safe place by any means. It is the seediest of seedy underbellies. But what a cool place, because there's these big caverns, narrow tunnels, little offshoots. I mean, you can literally come up with anything you want to do that you're like, I don't know where I'm going to put this in a city like this. You're going to put it in the Cartways because it's there.
One of my favorite,
underground gambling and fights and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, one of my favorite businesses in the main market is the Mary Sisters Meat Market, and they're butchers, very skilled, very proud.
X-card warning, guys.
Yeah,
X-card warning.
X-card warning. They are butchers of humanoid meat.
Yes.
They're
dwarf. You got it.
Yeah. Hester is one of them, and Glenfidia is the other, and they operate a tiny, colorful tent from which they sell neatly butchered and artfully arranged cuts of humanoid meat. Yes. They have some on ice, and they have some that are uniced. So it kind of ages and ripens a little bit. But they can break down a humanoid body in no time, and they don't care if the body is alive or dead, whether it's a man, woman, or child. They will
This is how a lot of the gangs and stuff, like the gangs or the cults that need to get rid of a body have arrangements with these people. So they'll come and take the body off their hands for them. It's a very mutual beneficial relationship. Yeah. So you're looking to get rid of a body, this is who you go talk to. Or
somebody is kidnapped, that's a hook, into a venture at all, because, humanoid meat is pretty prominent. They're looking for the rarities, like gnome and dragonborn, goblin, halflings. The more rare the race, the more expensive the meat. So like if you a shadow fae meat, is probably the most sought after and the most expensive. And so super grisly. We're trading in X-card land. But you got people who are proud with their craft, even though that most folks won't agree with the source, of their meat.
Yeah. Now, you got an annoying player who's like, I want to play a Kender in Midgard. You want to get rid of him? This is how you do it.
Yeah, yeah,
That's from Rare Midgard.
yeah. But
So
the Cartways expand, towards the border of Duresh. It's also the gateway, one gateway into the Ghoul Empire, as well. There's a city near the border that's underground that's called Lillifur, and it's just something that you can just make your own. You have the site, and you can do what with it that you wish.
And my recommendations would be if you're going to go into the Cartways, definitely check out the Black Market. Again, the Adventure Everyone Lies, which is the one I was talking about earlier that I'm running, is a great introduction to Zobeck, and it does bring you into the Cartways and to the Black Market. But there's a lot to be had there. So definitely I would recommend having your players check it out at some point because it's super, super cool. And like we said, there's so much to do. If your players ever get in trouble and they're trying to escape and they need to get out of the city secretly, not through traditional means, the Cartways is another way they can do it, or sneak into the city. The Cartways are there for that. There's a lot to be done. They can deal with shady characters and all sorts of stuff there. So have at it and have fun with it. Right.
There's not a map of the entire Cartways. Just make it up as you go.
Yeah, for sure. There's that. You couldn't make a map of it. I mean, you could probably take like a map of like the Underdark from like Forgotten Realms and be like, here's
Dyson
the map of the
Logos map.
It's that big.
Yeah,
exactly. It's massive. There's no anything to it. Just say you were given directions on how to get to the Black Market, and they get there because it's literally, it would be like navigating the Underdark in Forgotten Realms. That's the best equivalent I can give for you. Maybe not quite as massive of a scale, but big. Right. So what else? What's another great district that they should definitely check out?
Well, we talked about the Cartways, and we would be remiss if we didn't kind of connect that with the Kobold Ghetto.
Yes,
it is the area of Zobeck where the kobolds live. During the Strauss days, it was kind of more like a pen or a shanty town. But now it is a rich, robust district of Zobeck, and it's like going into a different world. The walls still exist. There's only two entries into the ghetto. One is the River Gate, which is along the Argent River, and there is the Ghetto Gate, which leads into the city itself. What's really interesting about the city is the ghetto is that everything is sized to kobolds. So if you're a big, that's what they call
two bigs, right?
Yeah, two bigs. You're going to be squeezing in and out. It's like kind of walking through a large diorama. In some parks, but the streets are maybe at best 6 feet wide. The entries to the structures, are very low, so you got to bend down to get into them. The roofs all interconnect, to kind of shade the streets from the sun, because again, kobolds are nocturnal, is a nocturnal race, and it really isn't designed for humanoids at all. In fact, the preference is, why they won't keep you out. All eyes are going to be on you when you're there. So it's usually good to have an in to the Kobold Ghetto and have kind of a guide. Somebody that's kind of shepherding your way through. But the Derry River is part of it. In fact, there's a little island in the middle that is part of the Kobold Ghetto. There's kind of a pseudo government, of the ghetto. There's all these tribal chiefs, they call them kings or queens, that kind of carve up the area and rule it. And like Joe said in the last season, some of these kings and queens, their terms may go 2 weeks, may go a couple of years, but there's a lot of them, and it all rolls up to the King of Kings or the Queen of Queens, who holds all of these various kings and queens in check to unite themselves, to try to have some semblance of organization. And it's kind of funny. The current one is Quadelmark. He has been in the position for I think less than a year, if I recall.
Is it? I'm not sure. I don't remember.
Yeah, there's so many. I read up on this, but Quadelmac is the name of the King of Kings.
That sounds right.
The King of Kings or the Queen of Queens gets a seat on the council. So they're represented there as well. But the goal of this role is to kind of somewhat unite the various kings and queens around there. They're constantly having to watch their back. There is another tribal chief called Prince Karamark. He's a foul-tempered kobold known as the Prince of the Night. He was once a close ally of a previous King of Kings named Kurlmac, and most of the kobolds, in the district, believe that the prince should have succeeded him. So there's this tension between Karamark and Quadelmac as to who is the rightful King of Kings. One of my favorite kobold king is called the Keeper in White. He's an albino lich kobold that has been alive for so long he's forgotten his name. Nobody knows what his real name is. He has a bunch of followers of misfits that obey him with a cult-like fanaticism. His torso is made of grafted mithril, and he has this clockwork heart that's locked away in his chest, and that's what's been keeping him alive for so long. But here's the rub: he doesn't have a key to it, and so he's obsessed with finding the key. So obsessed that his home is called the Throne of Keys, and it's a house littered with thousands of keys stolen from all over the city. Yep. I use him in Courts of the Shadow Fae. I had to Game of Thrones it a little, so where he had kind of a throne, made out of keys. I kind of played him like Andy Warhol, this really high voice, and somebody who knows all of the keys, where the keys came from, and what locks they go into, yeah. And the players thought, hey, we need a key to get into the through a shadow door and get to the court. So let's see if the keeper happens to have a key there. And they weren't successful, but it was a fun couple.
Wasn't there like a key guy in one of the Matrix movies? Wasn't there a guy like that? The Matrix that had that had keys to everything.
Yeah,
that would be kind of like, I was thinking like a quest hook where like you need a key to like a vault or something like that, and you're told, oh, this guy's got the key to the vault, but you don't tell him he's got a billion other keys, and the player show up and there's just hundreds and thousands of keys.
Yeah. Well, the lore just says he has keys, and I kind of put my own twist where he knows all of them.
No, for sure.
Yeah. But, in the district, you've got your seedier side. You've got the fighting pits. You've got, various criminal trades. But you also have the kobolds.
Lots of drinking establishments.
Yeah. You also have the kobolds that are the master clockwork, makers. They create the everwound spring. Traps, contraptions of all sorts. In fact, the district is littered with traps, and some very, very clever traps, as well. So, it's always good to have, a guide who knows their way around the traps, and the guides will charge, a lot of money. But, that's kind of another fun thing where you kind of run into, a kobold scarecrow. They call them chila bait beggars. They're made out of wood and wax paper, and they have compartments that blast out caltrops. They are warded with a minor glyph of warding, so it could explode on you. Another good one is the Jolly Water, and it's really not a trap. It's kind of like water balloons, but it's a liquid that's in these porcelain vases, and they get chucked down on them from the rooftop. But what's cool about this is the liquid contains a lichen that visibly glows when viewed with dark vision. And so
it's like fairy fire, essentially.
Yeah, so it's a way that you can be tracked. But
I mentioned him, I think, in our last episode too. But I want to bring him back because he's one of my favorite characters in Zobeck. Is a kobold named Black Eye, and he has this little pony and cart, and he gives tours of the city. My players met him when they saved him from Dib, and he gave him a ride around the city, and that was kind of an introduction to Black Guy for them. But he is a guy in the know. He knows people. He's got connections. He's got connections with some of the gangs. And he has hundreds of cousins, as they call them, in the ghetto. So if you need somebody to get you into the ghetto and keep you relatively safe in the ghetto, Black Guy could be a great character for that. He can set you up with the right people. He is such a great, I guess, what do you call him, a fixer sort of guy who can just hook you up with almost anything you want. Such a perfect character to introduce your characters to a Zobecker kobold and kind of start to intermingle with that society, hook you up with, maybe see your people in the city, get you to the right place at the right time, all sorts of stuff. Black Eye is just, to me, one of the most essential, kobolds to know in Zobeck, because he doesn't seem like much, but at least to me, he's got his fingers in everything. He knows all these people. And if you actually get on his good side, if you do something for him, he gets very protective of you, and he will like kind of treat you as one of his own, and he will want to help you and do, he's not looking to rip you off. At first he might want to give you a ride around the city and bring you by the vendors, so they slip him a few coins for to help with their sales. But if he feels connected to you, he will be like a fiercely loyal ally, which is awesome to have in a place like Zobeck. The other, I think, notable kobold in Zobeck is Goldscale, who's this golden kobold paladin, about as lawful good paladin as paladins come. He's the most paladin-y paladin imaginable. And he's got a mission to do good. And he's a fantastic character, very noble character, very good guy. Just really weird for a kobold, but he's got shining gold scales and, nice armor and, very, very righteous in his attitude. So if your party maybe is in trouble, if you're scrapping and the fight's going badly and you don't want them to wipe, maybe have Goldscale step in and save the day. It could be a good person to possibly meet and, maybe seed into some other, more noble quests if you're looking for more of that good aligned kind of stuff.
Yeah, you can think of him as, how can I help you, citizen?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, like, you're like, I don't need help, but I will help you. Like,
I will help you.
He's a little overbearing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will help you. I'm trying to think of the character, but there's a character in a movie that was like that. That was just like, almost overly helpful. That's Goldscale. He's a little too helpful.
Yeah.
So, but kobolds, man, don't underestimate them. They are what make I feel like the two things that make Zobeck is the clockwork and the kobolds.
Right.
because those are two unique things. You generally don't have a city where they're like, oh yeah, we have a whole kobold district down the street, and they're an integral part of our city. Like, yeah, they're still kind of second class citizens because they're kobolds, but they are, if you see kobolds walking down the street, it's not like, oh my god, kobolds, run away. It's there's kobolds.
Yeah. A lot of them work for the city. They maintain the bridges and the clockwork mechanism. I mean, kobolds have families, lots of cousins, brothers, and sisters. And there's the ones that are more on the lawful side, and some are on the more unlawful side. There's a lot of really great locations, in the ghetto. They have their own kind of dock area, where they kind of compete with the main dock area. It takes three kobolds to one human, to move a box, but, it's a great way for, the city to have dock workers during the day and dock workers during the night as well. And it's kind of, you can kind of have a fun tension, between those two when, the kobolds are undercutting, the main dock district and so forth. Yeah. The Undercity, there's an entrance to the Undercity in the Kobold Ghetto. Underneath the ghetto itself, there's cellars and small passageways. The tunnels are smaller; they're kobold size. The doors are kobold size. They have rat fights and weasel fights, down there. The ghetto Undercity connects to the main Cartways, in numerous places, and underneath the Derry River as well. Again, it's really not a place, that humans, hang out too much, but it's also a way to get to Lilyfor, which is, 140 miles to the north, and the kobolds have a very brisk trade, between Zobeck, Lilyfor, the Ghoul Empire, and so forth. Also smuggling, is practiced openly down there. So you can get rare wines and silks and the Black Lotus, which is a ingredient in a drug, poppy wine, things like that. And the merchants are always happy to cut the tax man, that exists in the Kobold district out to sell their wares, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, and they, like you said, the smuggling, they have these like chain bridges that they do where it's like chains and barrels, stuff like that they'll link and put across the water. They even have ones that go across the Argent to get out to the Margrave and smuggle goods in at night and things like that. They're really crafty. Like, don't treat these kobolds as just, like you said, fodder, like, dumb little creatures. They are smart. They are crafty. They are fierce. When backed into a corner, they will fight. But they also know when to run away. Like, they know when they're outmatched and run away. They're not going to fight to the death. Yeah, they're gonna bug out. And they'll probably come back with more. So keep in mind too, like if you're trying to get into the ghetto, there's a toll that you have to pay to get in
and out,
especially bigs
and out.
You're going to pay to get in and out. So if you're trying to avoid that, maybe Black Eye can help you. Maybe there's a way through the cartways or something like that. That could be something that your players might have to deal with. But generally speaking, bigs are not always just allowed to freely walk in. And if you are allowed in for some reason, you are in the ghetto, watch your back.
Yeah,
I would watch your back.
And if
you're gonna get pickpocketed,
and
at the very least, you're gonna get pickpocketed.
Oh, for sure. And if you don't speak Draconic, you're gonna probably be largely ignored as well.
Yeah. So, such a flavorful and cool area, though. Don't eat there. I would not recommend the food.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a cool place, and the fact that it's more than just tolerated, almost encouraged. I think people encourage it because, like, the kobolds earn their seat at the table during the revolt, right? Like they're there because they earned it. And slavery of kobolds was outlawed and stuff like that. but it's also, I think, encouraged. The ghetto is encouraged because it kind of contains them somewhat. I mean, yeah, you'll see them around the rest of the city at night, hitting the bars and stuff like that. But for the most part, they'll stay there. And they live there. They do a lot of their business there. So I think that is kind of the balance for people. Is like, yeah, we tolerate the kobolds, but we encourage them to stay in their own part of the city.
Yeah,
that's the compromise.
And the last, major area of the district, if your players need unique trinkets or magical items, there's Pentrick's Mundane Magical Items, which is a shop in the district. It's near the Ghetto Gate, which is the main gate into the city, and it's a jumble of curios and knickknacks. The book itself says it's more of a stall, but I played it as a full on shop that they can go into. Again, you got to go into a low door. All the displays are low, kobold size and things like that. But Pentrick is not your jovial nice guy. He's devious. He's wicked. And he owns a workhouse filled with indentured servants and they live in cramped quarters, below the city. And, their job is to, crank out these arcane trinkets. So while he has the goods, Pentrick is not a nice kobold.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely play him more as like the, if I ever there, I'm hunched up and he's kind of has that slithering voice, and kind of hissy, and he's not someone he's definitely he's like the greasy salesman too. Like he's just nice enough that he wants to make the sale, but one wrong move, he should try to steal something. He's got like clockwork contraptions that will protect him, and things like that. So watching around him, he's an interesting character.
Yeah. Well, we spent so much time talking about the Cartways and the Kobold Ghetto and the OGL drama and our adventures. We kind of ran out of time to kind of do our creature showcase. So we're definitely going to do a creature showcase in our next episode. Joe and I have selected some pretty cool creatures that you can use in your game. But next episode, we'll talk a little bit more about the personalities. We'll go deep into another district of Zobeck, and we'll have that creature showcase. So, Joe, how can people reach you?
So you can reach me on my YouTube channel, which, as I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, I just rebranded to the GM Toolbox. So youtube.com/@GM Toolbox. And I'm also on Twitter at GM_Toolbox. I'm on TikTok. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. We'll get all those links down in the notes for you guys. And I'm also on the Midgard Adventures Discord server at GM Toolbox there. So, keep an eye out. Come say hi. And, if you're interested in the whole Project Black Flag thing, I'll be talking a bit about that on my channel as well.
Right on. Well, you can reach me on the Midgard Adventures Discord server. That is the easiest way to get a hold of me. If you join, you can reach me at Clayton Thompson, and that's Thompson without a P. And we also have a dedicated channel for That Midgard Show on the server. So you can go there to post a comment, talk about the content of the show, post things of topics that you want us to talk about, anything you want. And if the server's not for you, definitely put your comments and your interpretation of lore in the show notes below. But the Midgard server is a great place to hang out. There's the Mead Hall, and there's all kinds of lore and adventure channels as well.
Yep, and we're also discussing Project Black Flag there as well, and playtest of that should be starting up in February. If anybody's interested, make sure you're signed up to do that because it's going to be cool. So, if you like our show, please make sure you click on the like button and subscribe to our channel here on YouTube, or make sure you're leaving us a nice review on your favorite podcast platform. Even better, spread the word about the Midgard Show. We're new, we're starting out, but we've been very appreciative of all the positive feedback that we've gotten so far, and we hope to keep improving and making it better for you guys. So we thank you very, very much. So remember, as Wolfgang Barr says,
strip it for parts and make it your own. Thank you for joining us. Peace.
Bye, guys.